It's Saturday, and it's time to kick off the Experts program. And our tech expert, Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, is helping us out this morning. Good morning to you, Luis.
Good morning, Mark. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. It looks like we've got the 4th of July weekend, Independence Day weekend going, that being on Tuesday. Now, are you guys working Monday and then giving folks the day off on Tuesday and Wednesday, or are you doing a Monday-Tuesday thing?
We never take the day off. You know that. No, most of the folks will be on Tuesday. We will have our after-hour support team will be available and ready in case somebody is working on the 4th and needs help. We will be in the office on the 3rd. Probably going to be a slow day. A lot of people are taking that day off. A lot of our clients, some of them are actually taking the entire week off. So
wow. Well, that's nice.
when the 4th happens kind of midweek, people say, well, why not? I can get 9 days off for the price of 4 vacation days.
Right. And the other thing too is that to me, I used to enjoy getting the day after the 4th of July off, back when we used to have fireworks shows.
Oh, yeah.
But now that we don't have any fireworks shows anymore, I just go to work on the 5th, right? Because it's not that big of a deal. Because I can remember, in the days when we had the fireworks shows in Monterey, thousands of people would come to Monterey for that show. And then they all tried to leave at the same time. And getting out man, it didn't matter if it was Highway 1 North or 68 to Highway 1. I mean, it was just like, it was a parking lot for like a couple hours. And we'd come over to my folks' house and watch the fireworks and then go home. But a lot of times we might wait till, 10:30, 11 p.m. to try and leave, because you were going to spend 2 hours in traffic. So you might as well just wait till the crowd thinned out a little bit and then take off.
Yeah, exactly. But don't have to worry about that nowadays.
No
fireworks.
Unfortunately. Hey, we've got an interesting story here to talk about, that Google is going to remove Canadian news links from searches in that country because of a law that was passed in Canada. And this is a law similar to what a few other nations have passed, and it has to do with the compensation to the originators of the content. So one of the way I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the originators of news content, whether they be traditional brick and mortar newspaper publishers, news organizations, they feel that their business model is undercut by online hosts like Google grabbing those stories, curating them, and putting them on their own platforms that they sell advertising against. So essentially, they are, quote unquote, borrowing news that's, say, generated by the Monterey Herald or the San Jose Mercury and printing it in their own way. But the Herald and the Mercury doesn't get dime one for that. And they're saying, hey, our newsrooms are eviscerated because our business model has been destroyed by online companies like Google. I was reading something the other day. In fact, Tony Ritter, I don't know if you know who Tony Ritter is. He's the former CEO of the Knight Ritter newspaper chain.
Oh, yeah.
So Tony's retired now. He lives in Pebble Beach. He wrote an interesting letter to the editor of the Carmel Pinecone that came out yesterday. And he talked about the fact, industry-wide, that from 1995 to, say, 2012 or so, or today, how much the advertising revenue for the entire industry has dropped. And it went from something like $55 or $60 billion in 1995 to like $6 billion today. And so you can imagine what that has done to the industry to lose so much of that business, and what it's done to newsrooms. An example of that is in Salinas. The Salinas Californian does not have a single local reporter. There are no reporters working for the Californian in Salinas any longer to generate local news, because the revenue doesn't exist to support it.
Exactly. And that's what these laws that countries like Canada passed, that basically are saying, look, it's not right that social media sites and web aggregators like Google can make money or monetize the news that other people produce without compensating them for it. And California recently passed a law that basically does the same thing, or at least they've introduced it in bill in California that's going to do the same thing. Whether it becomes law or not, we'll have to wait and see. But the idea is that if you're a journalist and you work for a newspaper and your byline is being used by, let's say, Facebook, when you do a search on Facebook and it pops up and then there's the story that you wrote, yet Facebook has hundreds of ads on that page that they're making money on, and you're getting nothing for it. And it's just not fair. The question is, the approach that Canada took basically made it really difficult for companies like Meta and Google to try to compensate the originators of the content content. Other countries like Australia and France have kind of gone back and figured out a way to make it more palatable. I think Canada will, but in the meantime, Google and Meta, that is, Instagram and Facebook, have said, we're just going to not allow any of that content to appear on our sites because it's just, we don't know how to pay you for it.
Mm-hmm. So let me give you the exact numbers that I have here. I just looked up on the CarmelPinecone.com the letter from Anthony Ritter, and he says in 2006, the newspaper industry had approximately $50 billion to $55 billion of advertising revenue, print and internet. Today, that number is $5 billion to $10 billion. To survive, daily newspapers have reduced their staffs by approximately 80%. And then he mentioned that the three national daily newspapers, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, are exceptions to the rule. But everywhere else, newspaper advertising business has been disintermediated, is the term that they use. Now we've got the politicians, interestingly enough, getting involved in this. I don't know how you put the toothpaste back in the tube on this. I mean, it may help a little bit, but the fundamental problem isn't that the internet came along and stole the advertising revenue, if you want to use it, if you want to label it that way. The fundamental problem is that people decided that they could get information elsewhere other than a hard copy of a newspaper, and so they went that way. And the same thing has happened with broadcast, television and radio to a lesser extent, but they've still been disintermediated by the internet, but no more so than the brick and mortar print press. Quite frankly, a lot of people, and here's the thing and this is why it's so hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, Lewis, is that for a lot of people, yes, they find information on the internet that may be curated, that was generated by the New York Times or the San Jose Mercury or the Monterey Herald. But for a lot of people, for whatever reason, they're not interested in all that news. And they may only be interested in, well, what happened in my town? And they only read about that. Whereas when they were buying the daily paper, they were getting their town's news, the region news, the state news, world and national, and the sports and all that. And for the most part, their interests were far narrower than what they were being sold. So as an example, if you look at, there are two local newspapers, weeklies, that do very well in this area, the Monterey County Weekly and the Carmel Pinecone. And for the most part, these are publications that are exclusively focused on what is going on in their communities, particularly the Pinecone. The Pinecone is hyper-focused on what's going on in Carmel, Pacific Grove, Monterey, basically that part of the peninsula, Carmel Valley. Yeah. And they are rewarded by a strong readership and a lot of advertising. And the Monterey County Weekly is more of a Monterey County, the entire county they cover. But the point being is that they've figured out what people are most interested in is what is happening close to home, and they want to know about that. Exactly. And so you super serve that core. And if people are going to find out what's going on in Sacramento or Washington or Paris or what have you, they're going to have to search that out elsewhere on their own because they're not going to get it in those publications because that's not what they're about.
Yeah, and that's really a shame too, because I think local reporting is really what holds local institutions accountable, whether it's politicians or, public agencies or private businesses. As long as you have local reporters looking into you and making you answer questions about things that maybe need to be answered, the public is best served. And without that, it's a big part missing in our society that I think is, like you said, we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, but we got to figure out a way to get some of that back at some point.
Right. And this may be a way in that direction. Louis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, has been our guest today online. It's alvareztg.com, at AlvarezTG. That is their Twitter handle. And Louis, the toll-free number for the I-Team.
Give us a call at 866-78-I-Team. That's 866-784-8326.